Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a rifle that should be familiar to a whole lot of people because there were quite a few of them made. This is the Remington Model 742 Woodsmaster rifle. And the Woodsmaster name spanned a lot of generations of this rifle. There are several models of the same basic rifle throughout its course of production. So we'll start out with a little history on the gun. And we'll talk about some of the model and caliber variations, and then we're going to talk about some of the things to look for in some of the gunsmithing tips and tricks that are pertinent to this model. I tell you, in growing up in East Texas, way back in the day, when someone said they had a deer rifle, they had one of two things. They either had some type of lever action 30-30, or they had some version of this Remington semi-auto rifle. Probably in 30-06. So they've been around for a long time. There's still a ton of them out there. They've got a bit of a reputation as being a problem gun. A lot of people refer to them as a jam-o-matic or some other derogatory term. But typically that's because it just wasn't maintained well. The guns that have been maintained well and taken care of are still out there running today, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be. So let's look at some of the history of this gun. Remington had Browning designed semi-automatic. This is not a Browning design, but Remington had Browning designed semi-automatic rifles in their catalog prior to these guns in the Remington Model 8 and the Remington Model 81, which were long recoil guns. The barrel was in a sleeve all the way out, had a large recoil spring there, and the barrel recoiled into the receiver, similar to the Auto 5 shotgun. And in fact, any of the Browning semi-automatic designs were recoil operated as far as long guns go. But in 1940, Remington had started developing a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle, which would eventually become this gun, but December 7 of 41 happened and everything was put on hold commercial-wise for war material stuff. And it wasn't until 1944 when they developed a working prototype of this rifle, but it was different. That prototype had an aluminum receiver, a longer receiver. It was actually long enough to accommodate 300 H&H Magnum. So, I mean, it was completely different dimensionally than what this gun was, but the bones were there. And then in 1947, one of Remington's lead designers by the name of Ray Crittenden, and we've talked about him before, was brought on board to kind of finalize this project, and brought on board the design team and melded some design teams together from different parts of Remington and DuPont, and determined what type of gas system they were going to use. They were looking at a gas system similar to the tappet system of the M1 carbine, or the expansion system of the M1 rifle, the M1 Garand rifle. And they finally went with basically an impulse gas system where the gas operates directly upon an action bar. And we'll show you what that is when we take this fore-end off here in just a little bit. But that was decided about 1947, and May 22nd of 1950 is when it was officially called the 740 Woodsmaster. The model before this was the Model 740 Woodsmaster in 1950. But there were some mechanical issues with the gun. They had ejection problems. They had problems with the gas corroding the heat shield inside the fore-end. So it wasn't until 1955 when the Model 740 Woodsmaster was introduced. And that's when it was introduced to the buying public. And you could have any caliber you wanted as long as it was 30-06. So a 22-inch barrel gun, 30-06, in two grades. The A grade, which was plain uncheckered wood, and the A Deluxe, or the ADL grade, which had machine checkered wood, was how this gun was introduced, at least initially in 55. And calibers were added and grades were added. So in 56, they added the grade B Deluxe, or the BDL, which had the same, it had checkering as well, but it just had a higher grade of wood. And they also added the .308 caliber 1957 saw the introduction of the .244 Winchester caliber, which eventually became the 6mm. And caliber introduction was parallel to the bolt-action guns, the Model 720, 721 series of the time. In 1958, we saw the .280 Remington come aboard. And there's a lot of talk about why .280 Remington instead of .270 Winchester. Well, there's some discussion that Remington had a not invented here type platform where they didn't really want anything that Winchester had developed put on their rifle. They didn't want to, and Smith & Wesson Colt did the same thing. But that said, they had the .308 Winchester. They didn't have any problem doing that in 1956. So there is an engineering reason for that, and it deals with port pressure, gas pressure relative to the bore diameter, as to why the .270 wouldn't have been a successful cartridge in this rifle. And then because of bolt redesign in the 7400, it was introduced in that later rifle after 1980. So anyway, .280 Remington, which became 7mm Express, renamed that, and then back to .280 Remington. It's worth a video on its own just from the cartridge. And then in 1959, this model was discontinued. The 740 was discontinued, and the 742 was introduced. So the reason that occurred is there was some engineering and design changes necessary in the 740 that were extensive enough to warrant the gun being basically reintroduced as a new model. The 742 Woodsmaster was born. So the early 740s had a pivoting extractor, like first year, like 1955 guns, had a pivoting extractor, and obviously it's 742, so it won't be here. You'll know that gun because it'll have a hole right here because that ejector, I'm sorry, not extractor, the ejector was pinned on this side. The ejector was pinned into the side of the receiver, and it actually pivoted. So they changed that to the clip-in style extractor common in the Remington bolt guns. During the course of the 740 production, they went to the plunger in the face of the bolt along about the same time to be the same as the other guns in the line. Well, with the 742, they repositioned the extractor and the ejector position in the bolt face, and they enlarged the bolt face or the ejection port. They enlarged it slightly to solve some of the ejection problems that the 740 did. But the most important thing that occurred with the 742 was they introduced the bolt latch. There's a bolt head and a bolt carrier in this rifle, and they rotate. And it has 9 locking lugs on the bolt, the 740 and 742. And what would happen over time, as the bolt runs backward and forward during the firing cycle, those bolt lugs would start chattering the top of the receiver, the rail in the top of the receiver. And that causes all kind of issues with the rifle. And it can be significant enough that it can be fatal to the rifle. It can be where the receiver needs to be replaced. Now, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth about, there are some gunsmithing fixes to that. They're expensive, but it can be done. So to remedy that, in the 742, they introduced a bolt latch, which was a spring-loaded flat stamped steel piece that was designed to hold the bolt head in position while the action moved. So that was pretty significant. So that was done with the introduction of the 742. They changed this screw in the front. The 740 had been known to have accuracy issues on subsequent shots as the gun heated up because this was a single pitch screw. And they changed this to a double pitch screw in order to allow for about 20 thousandths clearance on the fore end at the back of the receiver in an effort to increase the overall accuracy of the rifle. This will make more sense when we pull it apart in a second. The operating handle was slightly redesigned. The dimensions of the gas nozzle were slightly redesigned. The mag latch was made bigger, and the magazine feed lips were kind of changed up a little bit. All those changes in the 742 to make it a more usable rifle. And this gun was in production from 1960 until 1980, so 20 years of production of this rifle. And in that 20 years of production, 1.5 million of these guns were produced. So that's a bunch. And there is a bit of a caliber breakdown on this. 75% of these guns produced were in .30-06, like this rifle is here. Then it drops off really fast from there, obviously. .308, 12% of the guns were in .308. .243 Winchester, 6%. .280 Remington, 5%, and then 6mm Remington, .244 it was, and then 6mm, same cartridge, different twist rate. Only 2% of the guns were produced in 6mm, so there is some rarity on some of those calibers there. So also in 1961, they introduced a carbine variant, which was an 18.5-inch barrel, and they introduced a deluxe version, C for carbine CDL version, which is different than the 700 CDL of today. But it's 18.5-inch barrel in the carbine gun, .30-06 and .308 in that rifle. In '66, they introduced a grade B deluxe, very different gun. It had a little step here in the back of the receiver. It had more deluxe wood, typically lighter wood. It had impressed skip line checkering. So it was kind of a more deluxe version, I guess, if you will, on that gun. And then in 1968, there was, specifically November 26th of '68, when the Gun Control Act of '68 went into effect, it caused Remington to change the serialization of the gun. So those changes occurred during the 742 production. So again, 1.5 million of these things were produced. There's a bunch of them out there. They're still out there available for sale. They're still out there in the field today, and they're still coming into the shop for repair. This particular gun is part of a small estate that we bought just this last week. So we're still going through it, cleaning it up, making sure it's ready for prime time before we put it out on the showroom floor. But so far, it just shows that it's had typical storage and hunting wear, and it doesn't have a lot of the firing wear that we typically see on this gun in .30-06. So in 1980, well, back up a little bit, 1974, Remington decided they were going to reinvent the wheel again and make some modernizations of this gun. And in 1980, they introduced the Model 4 and the Model 7400. Now, the Model 4 is not the number 4. It's actually spelled out F-O-U-R, so it's the Model 4. And the Model 7400. And the only difference between those two is in the exterior finish. The Model 4 was a more deluxe version of the gun. The 7400 was the plainer gun. And it was typically, the thought process originally on the Model 4 was that it was going to be sold by Remington authorized dealers. And the 7400 was going to be the big box / discount stores. Well, the only difference was the exterior finish. The action was exactly the same. And so the consumers bought the 7400, and dealers were sitting on a lot of Model 4s that they couldn't sell, and they ended up having to discount those. And it was kind of a big deal that really hacked off a lot of Remington's dealers back in the 80s, me being one of them at the time. But anyway, the big change between the 742 7400 was the bolt. They went from the 9 small lugs to 4 large lugs, and when they did that, they hardened they put a rail inside the top of this receiver, and they hardened it so that they wouldn't have the chatter problem that exists in the 742 and the 740. So that was a very significant difference, made the gun a lot more, not just shootable, but made the gun a lot more, I guess, able to stand up to just the rigors of use year in and year out, or neglect, really. One of the other things they did, and if the light's just right, you can see it here. Prior to the 7400, this is a 2-piece barrel. There's a receiver ring and the barrel screws, or a receiver extension that the barrel screws into. Now, in the 740, there are some issues. Well, actually, I think I have the date somewhere. 1977, February of 1977. So well into the production run of the 742. The thread pitch of this was right-hand pitch, the thread where the barrel goes into the receiver. So as the bullets engage the rifling, the torque over time could actually make the barrel unscrew slightly and cause headspace issues. It could cause issues with the gun chambering. It's rare, but it can occur. But in February of '77, they changed that. They went to left-hand threads on this, and that did away with it initially. But when they introduced the 7400 and Model 4, this was a one-piece unit. So they did away with the receiver and receiver extension on that gun. So the 4 bolt lugs, the one-piece barrel. They introduced a self-centering gas seal in the gas system to allow the less bleed out into the receiver, make the bolt cycling speed a little bit more consistent, which helped with the overall feeding and ejection pattern of the gun. They also redesigned the magazine, larger mag release, heavier action bars. They made the gun a little bit more robust and a little bit more sturdy, but they also changed the scope mount. The hole spacing is a little different. 742 mounts typically won't fit 7400. So when you go to scope one of these rifles, make sure you're getting the exact mount. And everybody still makes mounts for both, so that's easy to do. The 270 Winchester was added as a caliber availability in the Model 7400. It does have a more robust action, and I guess they were over the fact of putting Winchester's name on the gun by then. So that gun went on until 2006. And in 2006, the Model 750 was introduced, which was the latest and last version of this particular rifle. They even made a patrol rifle version of that gun. It lasted to 2015. So all that being said, there's just a ton of them out there in various configurations. There's a lot of commonalities in there and the differences we've talked about. So should you buy one? And short answer is, provided it's a good workable gun, yeah. And typically the problems that we see with this gun are in the 30-06 caliber. We don't see as many other problems in the smaller bores, but again, as we've discussed, the smaller caliber guns are relatively rare compared to the 30-06. So the biggest problem, and we can see we're clear here, we're going to start handling and manipulating this gun. The biggest problem with this gun is rusting in the chamber. So there's really no good way to clean this chamber. There's no good way to get to the bore from the back of the gun like you would with a bolt-action rifle. Remington there for a while made and supplied with the rifle a dog-leg chamber brush that you could access from the ejection board and go in there and scrub the chamber as best you could. But what most people did, particularly in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when these guns were introduced and really super popular, was after they got done shooting or at the end of the deer season, they'd clean from the muzzle end, and then the gun would go in the gun rack or in the closet or wherever the gun lived for the rest of the year. And that did absolutely nothing for the chamber at all. So whatever moisture because of inclement weather that the gun had been exposed to during the hunting season was still there. It wasn't cleaned out. So the chamber would develop rust, scale, carbon, gunk, whatever, that was never cleaned out. And that caused problems with extraction. So the case would swell, stick to the chamber and rust. The gun's still trying to pull it back and extract the cartridge. So this has the same extractor that the Model 700 bolt-action rifle does. The difference is it's a relatively uncontrolled process. So unlike a 700 where you're lifting the bolt by hand and pulling the bolt to the rear, this is all done automatically by a gas system. So if there's resistance there because of the rust in the chamber, the rifle's going to still try to pull it out anyway. So what's happening is the extractor would either pull through the brass head of the case and or bend the extractor, and in worst case scenario, it would crack the bolt head at the rivet point of the extractor. So that's a big deal now because those don't exist anymore. If you were to need to replace a bolt, the bolt head on one of these guns, you're going to have to find one. You're going to have to find one that's been cannibalized out of a rifle. The last time I found one on, I think it was even eBay, it was well over $100 just for that bolt head. So you can see that there comes a point at which the gun becomes, or the parts become too expensive and the repair becomes too expensive to justify repairing the rifle, just from a monetary standpoint of what the gun is worth. Now, sentimental value aside, right? Grandpa's rifle or dad's rifle is, I don't know how you attach money to that, but I know that you don't attach money to that when it comes to reselling the thing. So that's one of the biggest issues. So if you have one of these guns, if you shoot it, invest in a chamber brush that is angled so that you can get in there. But the best thing you can do is on an annual basis, and I say this about virtually every gun, but this gun in particular, on an annual basis, get a gunsmith to pull this gun apart. And when we do a complete cleaning on one of these guns, we're pulling the barrel out of it. We take the barrel out, that way we can clean everything. We can clean from the boring, we clean everything and inspect everything. We inspect the bolt latch, we inspect the bolt head, we inspect the extractor, the ejector, all that type of stuff. And that really needs to be done annually. And by doing that, you can actually keep the gun running for a long time. There's no reason this gun can't be handed down to another generation and continue shooting with a little bit of care. So the chamber rust is the big deal. Most often, the feeding problems associated with this gun are the magazine. So the 742 magazine has a hold open feature. That's this lever right here. The gun's designed to lock open on an empty magazine. Now, having said that, it is impossible to pull this magazine with the bolt locked back because the bolt is being pushed forward against the magazine follower. So in order to pull the magazine out, you have to close the bolt by this lever right here. And now we can rotate this bolt latch and remove the magazine out of the gun. Now, having said that, the Model 760, which is the companion gun to this rifle, it's a slide action gun. It's not a semi-auto, the Model 760. That magazine will fit and function in the 742, the semi-automatic rifle. It just won't have the bolt hole open feature. And a lot of hunters have done that so that they can change the magazine more easily, I guess, than this gun. So on this original Remington magazine, you see it's caliber designated in the box, 30-06. And then when we get to the 7400 and the 750s, you'll see they use the same magazine for other calibers. It'll say 30-06, 280, 270, that type of stuff. It's usable in all those different calibers. Now, the short action calibers that this gun was chambered in, the 243, 308, this action length is the same. The bolt throw, the bolt length is the same. The difference is the magazine's blocked. The magazine's blocked to accommodate the shorter cartridge. So there's no difference in the gun. There's no short action bolt, long action bolt in a Remington 742, but the magazine's different. That said, as far as cleaning these magazines, there's really no good way to disassemble them. It can be done, but especially on the semi-auto, putting this magazine follower and spring back into where it engages this trip lever correctly, that's a very difficult process to do. So when we clean these magazines, we clean them in an ultrasonic cleaner and then blow them out and then put just a little bit of protective lubricant back on them to keep them from rusting. We don't try to disassemble them even in our shop. The other issue with the magazines is they're stamped metal, just stamped sheet metal. They're they can be dented. And that's a problem we see, that just from whatever has happened to them, they get dented to where the magazine follower is, you either can't load it all the way or it won't feed up. And I looked this morning, these magazines aren't being made anymore. There are some repro magazines. I think a company called Triple K makes 10-round magazines and maybe 5-round magazines for this particular series of rifle. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, sometimes they need to be tweaked to fit. They can be difficult. But this magazine, should you find one, and they're out there on eBay and on the other auction sites, but you can expect to pay probably $70 for that magazine and maybe $100 or more, especially if it is one of the short action magazines like 243. So guard those magazines with your life. Be very careful with them because they are rapidly becoming unobtainium. And it's an expensive proposition to buy another one of those. And without it, obviously the gun isn't nearly as nice as it is with the magazine out there. And that said, parts in general on this gun can be tough to find now. There are some stuff being remade, but Remington, even before the new rim arms, when Remington discontinued the 742, they pretty much discontinued all the parts. And even if you were to call Remington and say, hey, I need a whatever for a 742, they say, oh, that part's discontinued. We don't offer that part anymore. A lot of the parts from the Remington 870 small gauge guns will work in the trigger. I mean, there's ways around it. There's workarounds, and some parts are being remade. The action springs being remade, that bolt latch is being remade, that type of stuff. So there is some support for that. Wood is being remade, although it's, or 750 wood, 7400 buttstocks will fit. Not so much forends, but buttstocks, yeah, but it won't have the right checkering pattern. So it can be problematic and it can get expensive to replace the parts on this little rifle. So let me pop the forend off and we'll talk about what's going on under here as we get into that. So give me 1 second, let me pull that screw out. All right, so we pull the forend off, kind of show what this action, the front of the action anyway, looks like. We're not going to drop these pins out and pull that out, but so inside the forend, there's a metal shield there, and that's not readily separated. So we have that, we have a white line spacer, white line spacer, and then we have the metal forend cap. And this is that double threaded screw that I was talking about that they changed with the 742. The 740 is just a solid thread all the way down. And what that would do is it would push the forend against the receiver, and as the gun heated up, it would start stringing shots. So the thought process was that if you put this screw in correctly, when you put the forend on, it would give you about 20 thousandths of clearance on the forend from the back of the receiver, and then that would alleviate or help alleviate that accuracy problem. They also have this little winged, this is just a stamped piece of metal here, this little winged device here that gives some tension on the back of the forend so that the forend doesn't flop. So when you are evaluating a 742, make sure that there is tension here. So you shouldn't be able to just grab the rear of the forend and have it flop out like that. A little movement is going to occur, but it shouldn't be just grossly loose. If that's the case, this piece is probably missing. Now, if this piece is missing, the only way that piece is missing is because somebody did not put it back in there when they pulled that nut. So now we have another thing to think about is why was this gun, taken apart, or who took it apart that didn't know to put it back together correctly. So let me put this magazine in so I can lock the bolt back and show you the gas system. Okay. So what we have going on here, this is the gas block, and there's a gas port in the bottom of the barrel here, and this is the gas jet, I guess. And the gas comes out here, and there's a hole here that fits over this. So the gas directly impacts this block, moves the action to the rear, causes the fired case to eject, and then the recoil spring, or the action spring, which is this guy here, brings everything back forward. So when the gun is clean, this is something that virtually nobody does, including some gunsmith shops, and I don't understand why they wouldn't do it, is they can't get to that gas port and clean it because they don't pull this little Allen screw right here. Underneath this Allen screw, there is a detent ball or a check ball. It's a simple ball bearing that has to be removed, and then you can access the gas port so you can clean that out. Now, what we have found in virtually every one of these guns that we've had, at least the first time we've had them, is that that's never been removed, and that ball is carbon locked in place. So that can be difficult to remove because you're working in a blind hole. The way we've done it successfully in the past is once it pull the barrel, we'll plug the chamber end with just a large rubber stopper, and then go in here with compressed air, and then hopefully get enough pressure to loosen that detent ball and get it out there and clean that up. So that needs to be done. That's should be part of the annual cleaning process on this rifle. So other things that can occur here, this action spring over time, any spring will take a set. If you or your gunsmith goes to replace this action spring, do not use a used part or a cannibalized part. This is being remade, this action spring. They are available from Gun Parts Corporation for like $9. So use a new spring. And the problem that we run into with this rifle and older rifles, obsolete rifles in general, where parts are becoming a bit hard to deal with, is sometimes the part you get, a used part, is no better than the part you're replacing. So if it's all possible to get new reproduction parts or new old stock parts, that's certainly what you would want to do. So to pull this gun the rest of the way apart gets a little finicky. The buttstock is held on by a simple draw bolt. There's no action tube or anything back here like there is on, say, a Remington 1100. So that's just a simple draw bolt under this butt plate. Pull that out. 2 pins here, just like a Remington 870 or 1100, can drop the trigger housing apart. This is cast aluminum. So the front half of the gun is where things get a little bit more murky. So this roll pin comes out. You can actually then remove the recoil spring or action spring guide and the action spring out. And this particular nut can be something of a problem. In order to get, everything comes out the front. So in order to get down to where you can get the bolt out, or even if this plastic ejection port cover breaks, that's the last thing to come out of the gun. So if you're going to replace a cracked ejection port cover, you have to pull the barrel and the bolt to get that out of there. So be that as it may. This nut is a hex nut, but it's weird diameter. It's 25/32 is this particular hex nut. Now on the 7400 they went to a 3/4, but on the 742 and 740 is different. It's a round nut with detent holes where it requires a spanner to pull it off. But on this gun it's a 25/32 hex nut. Now you can use, and I see people do it all the time, crescent wrenches and things like that, but you run the risk of spreading these action bars. The factory tool, and there's a tool currently made by a company called Mink, M-E-N-C-K. I don't know if it's currently being made. I have one, but I've had it for years and years. I don't know if it's currently out there. It's a very thin-walled, open-end type wrench that fits across this exactly right, and then you can it just screws off just like any other bolt. And then you can pull the barrel off, and then you can pull the bolt and action side assembly out. Well, you have to drive, there's a pin here that has to be driven down through that holds the operating handle in place. The operating handle twists and comes out, and then the bolt and operating slide can come out. So generally not a DIY home gunsmith, home shooter kind of thing, and that's why I strongly suggest that you have a gunsmith in your area that's familiar with the 742s. Take a look at that. And quite frankly, that's getting rare too. It seems that if you just call around to local gun shops in your area that work on guns, if it's not a Glock or an AR-15, maybe they don't know how to do it. But I don't know, a lot of us are getting older and dying off and just deciding to go walk on the beach instead of screw on guns anymore. But anyway, annually this should be done. It should be blown apart to that degree to take care of that. So some other things to look at is that bolt latch. The bolt latch has 2 springs, and those springs take a set also. Now, one of the last things when Remington was still supporting the 742, one of the last seminars or gunsmith updates that they pushed out was to take a number 7.5 shot, a piece of lead shot, number 7.5 shot, drop it in the hole for the bolt latch spring, and then effectively that was increasing tension on the bolt latch spring. To me, it's easier just to make a longer bolt latch spring, but whichever. But that bolt latch is being replaced, that should be replaced with a new one if the old one is showing any type of wear whatsoever, and new springs. So if if you have the gun that somebody's done that piece of lead shot trick into, you may have to change the length of that spring, because now that you're not going to get that piece of lead shot out of there without drilling it out. So the bolt latch is important, and it needs to be somebody that's familiar with how that bolt latch works. So we talked about the gas check detent ball. So cleaning the chamber, cleaning the bolt lug recesses, all of that is super important on a 742. I could make an argument that if you have a model 740, you should probably retire the gun. It's probably, there is no bolt latch in the gun. You cannot put a 742 bolt latch or a 742 bolt in a 740, because there's an additional receiver cut in there to accommodate the bolt latch. So it's really not upgradable to the bolt latch version. So appreciate the gun for what it is, particularly if you have a rarer one in one of the smaller calibers or one of the higher grades. But it's generally not going to be a shooter, at least not anymore. There's just no way to fix them. Now, we talked about the bolt, the bolt scarring up the inside of the receiver. And I don't know if we can show it here, but we do have a still picture that we're going to inset into this video to show these rails. What we're talking about is these rails on top of the receiver right here. This center track on the receiver is what we're talking about. Now, the receiver is mild steel. It's not hardened. Otherwise, they couldn't machine it. So the bolt lugs are much harder than the steel on the receiver. And so you will see chatter marks right back here for when the bolt reaches its extreme rearward position. The inertia of the bolt allows those lugs to engage the steel on this notch in the receiver, and it chatters it up. So take a look at that picture, and you'll see what I'm talking about, the still picture. So before you buy a 742, and particularly a 740, but a 742 certainly, pull the magazine out, hold that bolt to the rear, use a flashlight, look in there. If that rail is chattered up, don't buy it. Yes, we can fix it, and we fix it by using a long feed wire welder, not a TIG. TIG gets too hot and causes problems, but a long feed wire welder to weld that up, and then special long shank mills to go in there and remill that rail. Now, as you can imagine, especially today, the cost of doing that would be more than what you would spend on the rifle. So if you have a 742, you see that 742 that's all chattered up on the inside, if it's still running, great. Run it till it doesn't, and then it goes on the wall. If you haven't bought it yet, if it has those chatter marks, don't buy it. When we see those chatter marks mainly on 30-06 guns. I don't recall ever seeing it in a 243 or a 6mm 244 Remington gun. I've seen it in 308, but I don't remember seeing it in 243. And that may just be because I haven't seen as many 243 as I have 30-06, obviously. So that's probably the first thing to look for if you're looking at the interior of a 742. So how do we evaluate? How do we put a value on these guns? So the same three things apply, right? Originality, scarcity, condition. So a lot of you are saying, oh, nobody collects 742s, but they do. And they should, because it's an important part of Remington history. It's just a pretty cool gun, a pretty cool family of guns. And they were available in some pretty rare configurations. For example, we know that the 244 Remington was only 2% of the production. And if you have a 244 Remington in a higher grade gun, we're still now talking about a few $1,000s worth of rifle. So they are collectible. So originality, look for the bluing. Remington was kind of late to adopt salt bluing. They didn't adopt salt bluing until well in the 50s on most of their models. They were rust blued prior to that. So all 740s are rust blued. And at least the first, I don't know, maybe quarter of the production of 742s were typically rust blued, not salt blued. So if you have an early gun, a 740 that has that high gloss, lustrous looking liquidy blue, it's probably been reblued. We've talked about it before. You can look at the holes that these pins go through. Look at the edge, and I use a 10-power jeweler's loop, to be honest with you. Look at the edges of the holes. They should not be dished out. So also the wording here, the Woodsmaster, the little registered trademark signature on the back, or a little stamp on the back of that, they should all be crisp and clear, and no signs of being washed out by polishing. This edge is extremely hard to keep straight and clean when you're polishing on a polishing wheel. When we used to reblue these, the correct way we would do that is with a block, and we would block it this way, and we would use a wheel on the rounds. But that said, I don't know anybody that really does that anymore. So, and then condition. We talked about all the things to look at, aside from the obvious, you know, the condition of the bore. Is there any rust on the gun, the wood cracked, things like that. So we've talked about that. So how would you date the gun? There's a couple of different ways to do that. The serial number doesn't tell you a ton, but if you go to the Remington website, they do have these broken down into serial number blocks. So they do list the serial numbers on the 742 series as to a general 4 or 5 year date range for this prefix. But then you can always go to the date code, which are these two numbers. I lost my pointer. These two numbers right here on the left side of the receiver, or left side of the barrel, right forward of the receiver. You'll see a 2-letter date code, or it's a letter and then a pair of letters, depending on when it was made. And if you go to the Remington Society, or there's a few other places, but the Remington Society has a chart with these date codes on there. So this is D, I can't even see it, DQ, I think. So you can actually look and see when the gun was made, or at least when the barrel was made. Now on a gun that's designed for the barrels are readily interchangeable, like an 870 or 1100, that may not necessarily correspond to the receiver, and then you'd have to look, okay, well that date code makes sense with the block of time when this receiver serial number prefix was being used. So you've got to kind of do a little bit of detective work there. But on the 742s, where there generally wasn't barrel interchanging, at least outside of the factory, then we can pretty much feel confident that that's when the gun was made based on this date code. So what can you expect? I mean, what kind of a shooter are these rifles? Well, they're not a bolt action. I mean, and they can be 1.5 inch, 2-inch guns. If you get ammunition that it likes, a 2-inch group is generally where you're going to get this gun at 100 yards. What I've found is on guns that are still stringing, even with this double threaded bolt. Sometimes I've had some success with putting just a rubber grommet when we put the gun back together. Just a rubber grommet right between the bolt and the end piece here gives it a little bit of additional spacing and allows me to tighten the fore-end up a little bit more, and that has helped resolve some accuracy problems on the pads. Doesn't work all the time. I don't know that anything works all the time, but I think a 2-inch group should be, if you're getting a 2-inch group, you should be happy that's what you got on this rifle, because that's kind of what it's designed for. So there's a whole lot of stuff on the 742. I probably went way longer than I wanted to, but it's an important rifle. A rifle has been a big part of my youth, and we've been working on them now since I first started back in the early 80s. We've been working on these guns and evaluating them and having them come through the shop. So if you like what we're doing, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, drop us a comment, let us know what you think. If there's a make and model, if we can get a hold of it, we certainly will do that. I think we had somebody ask for a Remington 600 and 350 Magnum. I would love to find one of those guns. It's a super important gun, and I like them a lot. But if we can find it, we will certainly do a video on it. So We appreciate your time. We appreciate all the support you've given to the channel, and we'll see you on the next one.